Well, hello and welcome to episode number 337 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in this week's show we learn the last ever A380 has been assembled. The A321 flying from the US to the UK is unveiled, and a time when most airlines are retiring their passengers' 747s, one airline is refurbishing theirs. In the military section this week, a vintage World War II B-25 Mitchell makes a forced landing in California, and we learn that the U-2 will be a regular tenant at the famous RAF Fairford here in the UK. Captain Nick is in conversation with Ian Palmer as he talks candidly in part 3 about his battle with alcohol, and we go slightly off topic this week as Captain Al, Matt, and they talk to weather forecaster Dan Holley about his unusual hobby of storm chasing, something that would go down well in the UK today. So joining me over in the awesome PTUK studios this week, it's Matt Smith.
Is the weather a little inclement where you are by any chance, Carlos? It's gloriously sunny here. I don't know what you're on about.
Honestly, Matt, honestly.
Look behind me. You see it's blue skies. There's some aircraft I can't identify because I'm rubbish at military aircraft flying behind me.
A400M.
A what, sorry?
A400M.
Is that? That's really embarrassing because I'm supposed to know that really well. Anyway, yes, it's a bit grim outside, isn't it, mate?
It's not the best. No, it's certainly changed over the last 24 hours here in the UK. We're experiencing was it autumn weather?
Autumn is a good word for it, actually. Although, to be fair, it's not just awful here because we weren't going to be having Armando this week, but I'm delighted to say that he's here with us right now. And the reason why is essentially bad weather has stopped play for you as well, Armando.
Yeah, that's it. This week has just been an interesting flying week. Excuse my dog.
Your dog has a cold.
I think my little dog just ate my big dog.
Right. Okay.
Good. There she is. Good stuff.
Excellent.
Keeping the show's going great. No, yeah, it's been
it's all right. Nobody will notice. It's fine. Just
flying in some weather, and I was supposed to do some volunteer flying today, helping the U.S. Army out, and the ceilings are 700 overcast with moderate rain, so that's not going to happen. And then tomorrow I'm supposed to fly skydivers, and we'll see how that goes.
Oh, well, we're glad you got time to come with us on the show this week, Armando. Perhaps we can give bad weather every week so you can just make it here every week.
He's got to earn a crust, my friend. He's got
I know.
And I will say, to quell the rumors, despite what he said on APG, Captain Jeff is not trying to pillage me. I just happen to spend more time in Atlanta than I do in Charlotte right now, so I'm meeting up with him every chance I get, and we went to a nice Korean barbecue where they cook right there at the table, and as usual, we solved all the world's problems over a couple beers.
Well, and I can't think of better company to do that with, let's be honest.
He's such a genuine guy, completely different than he is on the podcast.
Right. Okay.
So unfortunately, this week Nev can't be with us. He is jet setting around. I think he's jet setting in the UK this week, isn't he, Matt? He's somewhere up north, I think, this week. So Nev can't be with us. And he's off next week as well. We've given him 2 weeks off this particular.
You are aware that I am literally the only one out of all of us who hasn't missed a single show for like what feels like an eternity now, because this is the thing. The trouble is since all this whole social distancing thing has all kicked in, literally nobody else is allowed to come in the studio at the moment. So it's like, in order for the show to go out, I have to be here come rain or shine.
Hold on. You have, you have got some holiday booked, Matt.
Oh, do I? Oh, good. Oh, that's good. When's
October.
That? Oh, for October. Lovely. Okay.
Yeah, you've got nice. 2 shows off.
That'll be nice and sunny then. Yes. Okay. That's rather dependent on us being allowed to, because we've got restrictions that are being applied here in the UK again at the moment. But see.
Nev sends his apologies.
He does.
He misses you all, but he will be back in a few weeks' time. But we have got a 4th host this week on the show, joining us as a guest. He's not been on for a while, but we're glad to have him back on the show. So all the way from California, from the Airplane Geeks, we've got the awesome Brian Coleman.
Yay! The fans go wild.
I'll invest in a soundboard, I promise. That'll
We'll put it in post.
Yeah, we'll mend it in.
And And for those of you who may be watching the live YouTube feed, apologies for Brian's shirt, but we are supplying sunglasses for everyone who was watching.
Yeah, 3D ones, so it pops more. That's the answer.
but it's going to be 90 degrees here in California today.
I know, you're the only one with decent
as
weather
it was
at
the day before. As it was the day before. Yeah, we just have a little bit of smoke in the air, but if you ignore the smoke from the fires, it's really not
I
bad.
kind of feel, Brian, that you should be presenting a gardening program here.
He doesn't look like Monty Don in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's since I can't travel anywhere, it's all about being on holiday, right? So I thought that I'd do holiday, and I could even sport a holiday festive mask as well.
Look at that. Look at that. For those of you listening to the audio version of the show, Brian's just popped on now these are not homemade. Is that the correct term?
Yeah.
But basically they're face masks.
They're handmade.
Oh yeah. Handmade face masks. Look.
Yeah, because of the pandemic, a friend of mine
Wait, there's a
was
pandemic
really
going
bored.
on? What? Hey?
Yeah, this little thing in Coronaville. And so she was really bored, and really good seamstress and a fun graphic designer as well. So we decided to start a little venture and make face masks.
See, my favourite one is the Star Wars one that you showed us earlier. There we go. Look at that.
Star Wars.
Yeah, it is. It's got like C-3PO and all sorts on.
Although this one's not available on the website, it's kind of fun because it's kind of planetary. And if you put in a special order, I could actually put Uranus on your face.
Okay, lovely. And Carlos,
because there was Saturn there. There was Saturn there on Earth, but there's some traditional ones with
that's very much like it. Yes.
for Grant, hot air balloons.
Oh yes, of course, yes, absolutely.
For just anyone into traveling.
Lovely.
But can we get a PTUK logo one, Brian?
Oh yes.
Only if you could find the fabric.
Right. Okay. Leave it with me. I'll get some printed.
Custom fabric is ridiculously expensive because I looked into that, and it was right about $75 a yard.
That's all right. I know someone who can do that for us.
Can you just 3D print it, Brian?
It wouldn't be very flexible.
That's your idea. Be a bit sort of preformed and not suitable. Anyway, should we do some stories?
Yes. So big thanks to everyone who's joined us on the live show tonight. Big thanks to everyone in the YouTube chat room. Loads of people. God knows why they're watching tonight in the YouTube chat room. We've got Lane Street, Stephen H, Alan Loveday. Mike Williams, hello to you, Mike Williams. We've got Alan White, Lara Megan Carrion's in the chat room. Obviously,
never heard of her. Who's
on
that?
Things. Richard Adams. We've got Sturman. Gareth, hello to you, Gareth. Brian Coleman's in the chat room as well, which is always handy because he's a guest. But Jonathan Warner is in the chat room.
Lane
Tony
is depressing
S.
me now. Look, here we go. Look, he says about 25 degrees, 77 Fahrenheit, and blue skies. Not Seattle blue skies nonetheless. Look, see, everybody is trump carding us weather-wise at the moment.
Nick Codling. Dave Abbey, Stephen Ivy is also in the chat room. The lovely Myla, hello to you, Myla.
Hi, Myla.
Hope you're well. APG Show is also in the chat room as well.
Never heard of them.
Never heard of them. Who are they? So big thanks to everyone who has joined us in the live YouTube chat room this evening. Don't forget, if you're listening to this show as an audio podcast and you want to see what the crazy things that happen in the YouTube show, go take yourselves over to YouTube,
don't
look us up, Plain Talking UK, and don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon to be notified when we eventually go live each week on a Friday night.
If we don't get any tech issues like we did tonight, which is why we were late starting.
We all had tech issues. It's brilliant. We shared the love, shared the tech issue.
That's the one. Yeah.
So we are going to move our show on swiftly then, as we do each week, with our rundown of the weekly news from around the world and the UK. So if everyone is ready.
No chance.
Let's go. Quickly, push the button. So kicking off this week's first news story is on the simpleflying.com website, and it's the end of an era. So the final A380 has been assembled. That's it, guys. That's all, folks. The final A380 fuselage has been assembled this week. The assembly marks the end of an era as the A380 program draws to a close just 15 years after the aircraft's first flight. It shouldn't come as a surprise that the A380 assembly line is slowly drawing to a close. After all, we've all known about the end of the A380 program for a year and a half now, with some A380s, as we know, already being retired. In February, the Simple Flying website reported the final A380 fuselage had made the journey to Toulouse. Well, now the fuselage has finished its initial construction. This means that Airbus Manufacturing Station 40 is now out of work. There's still a bit of work to complete on this aircraft, as many parts have to be installed on the particular airframe itself. And the final Airbus to be assembled carries the manufacturer's serial number 272. It is one of the 9 outstanding deliveries of the A380, and 8 aircraft are due to go to Emirates, the largest A380 carrier. While the additional A380 is due to be delivered to Japanese carrier ANA, for the time being it seems though both airlines are delaying future A380 deliveries given the current situation. The initial assembly of the final A380 marks the end of an era for the giant of the skies. Sadly, it will be a short-lived era. The Airbus A380 has quickly fallen out of favour with the airlines worldwide, something that the current situation hasn't helped with. Airlines are favouring the more fuel-efficient twin-engine aircraft and the A380's colossal size with its main selling point. However, it seems though this may also be the aircraft's downfall. There are very few niche routes that sustain enough traffic to make the A380 viable, such as London to Dubai or London to LA. However, given the current wall of travel restrictions, even the latter can't support the A380. So for the time being, the A380 family remains firmly grounded, and only a handful of aircraft from Emirates and China Southern are currently flying. However, the plane itself will still be around for many years to come, and airlines likely won't be keen to scrap brand new aircraft. As such, those delivered within the past year will probably still have some usage yet. It's more of a question of when they will return to the skies rather than if, and it's unclear when this final A380 will actually be delivered. So it's a shame, guys. I class myself as being lucky to have had the chance to flown on the 380 a number of times with Emirates and Qantas, but
we've said this so many. We've said this. Sorry, if I bring a fader up, it works so much better. We've said this so many times, though, haven't we, guys? It's like it's an incredible aircraft that just arrived at completely the wrong time, isn't it? I mean, I'm not. I think if it had arrived in a different time, maybe we'd have that same fondness for like the 747 that we have. Because I mean, I know several cabin crew who've worked on one. They don't like it from a operations point of view, but I mean, I don't know a single passenger who's been on one that says they didn't like it as a passenger. I'd
be curious to hear, Brian, looking into your crystal ball. What do you think is going to happen with these airplanes? Do you think they're just the Emirates? Well, they can't anymore, or do you think they'll just end up going to some charter or just get scrapped at some point?
Yeah, I think they're just going to get scrapped because of the cost of flying them. Which is really unfortunate because with all the flying I've done, I've yet to fly on one. So that's kind of sad. Was really looking forward to doing it. And I think something that was just crazy, I was reading an article the other day where someone was proposing, I believe it was like 960 seats in one. So an all coach configuration. And yeah, it's so much for social distancing here. Although I guess the good news is the Black Plague only lasted for 5 years and took out 45% of the known world's population. So we only have 4.5 more to go. There just might be room for that 900 and some seat A380. So, yeah.
So, Brian, why do you think that this didn't sell in the US?
I think because everyone went away from the hub and spoke system. Or predominantly went away from it. And certainly there are still routes, but people preferred frequency. And with smaller aircraft, you could just get from not the major, words are escaping me, but the non-predominant airport, like in LAX or San Francisco to JFK, they'd rather go from Burbank to Omaha and not have to connect in Chicago in order to get there.
Yeah, that's
yes,
totally
that's,
right. And we've done a couple of stories in the recent past where American Airlines, United Airlines, they're announcing new routes, and that's exactly what they're getting away from hub and spoke even further now, and they're targeting these smaller markets where they know they can fill the airplanes.
And yet
but
weirdly,
like we say so many times, there are people analyzing every penny coming in and coming out and looking at these markets, and like Brian's saying,
But the hub spoke system that you're talking about there, though. I mean, if you're Emirates, that seems to be working so well for them. If you see what I mean. I mean, it's if you can literally fly to anywhere in the world, but it's via Dubai, and people don't seem to mind that. Certainly when it comes to Emirates, I don't know whether it's perhaps because of their position, flying to like Singapore or whatever. If you were going to do it with Emirates, you go via Dubai, wouldn't you? So,
yeah, I think they're kind of doing just hub to hub, but their geographic position is so advantageous that they can reach a good chunk of the world's population. You could probably argue that the U.S. is actually their furthest destination, so they can. They're filling those airplanes, but by just doing hub to hub and then letting the regional airlines, in Southeast Asia or our low cost carriers in Europe or here in the US, code share. Once they get the 400 people, 500 people to JFK, then let Delta take them to Albany or something like that.
No,
actually, Mike Williams in the chat room makes a good point. Actually, he says that about these being deployed in the Middle East using old chartered 747s. He's sort of had experience with in the past. He says he can see the used A380s being used for that kind of operation. Lots of people travelling together is far more important than efficiency.
I mean, I don't know if I feel about that, especially in these.
Well, not in his current climate.
Like I say, the slightly current climate. Like, if I could afford it, then I'd rather, frankly, fly private jet. If I'm honest, but
wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all?
But
that'd be nice.
Funny old times, isn't it?
Moving on to the next story, Brian. This one for you, and this is obviously with the PPE you're wearing. This is quite an apt story.
Yeah, and not quite sure who brings this to us because it opened up in Apple News and it kind of cut the
BGR.com.
Okay, so are they a reputable news source?
We'll say yes. Why not?
Okay. So
it's a great question. We don't care about that.
Well, they're advertising wine at the top of their website, so they must be okay.
Okay. So Airline in Italy came up with a clever coronavirus strategy to make flying safer. What, they stopped flying? No. The airline industry has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. Really?
Does anybody
Hardly
notice?
a surprise. Yeah. Anyone? I certainly haven't been on an airplane since January, so yeah.
My goodness.
Yes.
I mean, hardly a surprise. In Carlos's defense, he keeps trying to get on an aeroplane, but they keep cancelling it left, right, and centre. In fact, the only persons that have been on an aircraft recently are Armando, and that's usually because he's flying, and Nev, because he's managed to do one trip to Edinburgh, and he's doing one to Newcastle and one to, did we say Geneva or Sweden or something like that? We're going to get told off for not knowing, as I say. So there's two people that have been doing a bit of flying.
Yeah, good for them. I am jealous.
Yes.
So the story continues. Hardly a surprise. Countries across the globe instituted nationwide lockdowns earlier this year and effectively brought air travel to a near standstill. Even now that things are slowly but surely opening back up, air travel isn't exactly a top priority for many people these days. I'd argue with that. I think it's a really top priority for me. I just don't feel comfortable doing it. No. Anyway, in the light of that, Alitalia, the largest airline in Italy, recently rolled out an arguably clever marketing ploy to convince potential travelers to return to the sky. As detailed on 1 Mile at a Time, Alitalia recently launched coronavirus-free flights to give passengers peace of mind. The airline will ensure that everyone on board is coronavirus-free by requiring passengers to submit a negative coronavirus test within 72 hours before flight. I have to stop reading right here because what a bunch of crap.
Oh.
No, because so it's 72 hours before. You could test negative one day, test positive the next day, let alone test positive 3 days later. In my opinion, being that I have MD so close to my name, it's just complete rubbish.
Okay.
I just don't see how this is making anyone safer with the latency of the ability to test positive, plus with just the crappy tests that are available anyway, and their inaccuracy. Again, this does not make me feel safer at all.
Do you
End of
think,
editorial comment.
Is this? No, absolutely. I mean, do you think this? I won't say. Well, I'm going to say the word publicity stunt, but perhaps that's not quite how I mean it. I mean, is it?
It's marketing spin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is it one of those things where it's an attempt to try and look to make people feel better? I mean, do you think that's what it's thinking? Well, this is our idea. We think this is how they'll solve it, and and it's
yeah, but so I say yes, but it is necessary. It's necessary to do something. If you can get 10% more capacity in an airplane by making people feel safer, then that's 10% that you're getting in the airplane, and then that 10% is going to say, "Hey, I had a great experience and it was just fine." And look at Alitalia doing a great job, and then they're going to talk to somebody and get somebody else on the airplane. So you got to do whatever you got to do to get the airline industry back going again.
So I'm sorry, Matt, but Armando, I was on a call yesterday with United, and they announced a pilot program where they're going to do rapid testing at San Francisco. So it's a pilot program. They're going to roll it out. They're doing the Abbott test, which is I don't know, probably 75% accurate, but you get the results in 5 minutes. And the plan is to test people. I'm sorry, the way they rolled it out was they would test everyone before they got on the plane. Then as questions came up about this service, they admitted that passengers would have to pay for it, and it was only voluntary. Now, if they tested everyone with a rapid test in 5 minutes, I would feel a lot more comfortable getting on an airplane with everyone else that tested negative. But even still, with a 75-80% accuracy rate on the test, it's potentially missing a lot of people that are going to be flying.
Indeed.
Yeah,
In fact,
I certainly agree with you.
There's some comments in the chat room, actually, which I'll just run part through with everyone. So, I mean, Stephen H. is saying that it gives you marginal more security if you're bothered by it. They probably still have to have a mask and no snogging with strangers rule, which I think is sound advice for sort of life in general, perhaps. Alan White, he's very much agreeing with you, Brian. He's saying that, exactly right, Brian, 72 hours ago, you were COVID-free. Is the aircraft going to be a time machine and go back and collect you 72 hours earlier, which is again a really good point, isn't it? It's this is the thing. I don't know. I suppose as the nervous passenger amongst us all, I suppose I guess I'm saying from my point of view, I suppose it's an attempt to try and make passengers feel better. I mean, the thing is I mean, I guess this is going to be a very unpopular opinion perhaps here, but maybe given what's going on at the moment, maybe we shouldn't be flying. But obviously, the industry needs people to be flying. I mean, we don't want these beautiful aircraft to all be grounded, for any longer than they have been already, frankly.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would argue that the safest. If you want to be safe and you want to know that you're safe, then don't fly. Don't expose yourself to that risk. And I mean, I've said the whole time that I've been flying. It's my dream, it's my love, it's what I love to do, it's my job. But given the choice, had I been given the opportunity to take a extended leave, I would have absolutely taken it, because I don't want to expose my family and my in-laws and my parents and my friends to that stuff, especially just traveling through Atlanta. I was talking to Jeff about this. Atlanta's packed. There's 3 out of 7 concourses that are just packed full of people. In Charlotte, I feel never slowed down. There was a story that we did 3-4 weeks ago that said they were able to trace, and I think it was in Canada, they were able to trace 7 cases to Charlotte or something like that. And whenever I commute through the Charlotte airport, it's like it's never slowed down.
Right.
So Yeah,
and yet
limiting
weirdly,
exposure.
Yeah, you compare that to the picture that Nev sent us in the group chat this week when Nev flew through Terminal 5, wasn't it, Matt?
I think
at
it was,
Heathrow?
yeah, virtually.
And Matt sent us a picture of Terminal 5 at Heathrow, and it was literally, there was 3 people in the picture.
Yeah. It's
it.
The contrast, bearing in mind that's a ridiculously busy airport, the contrast is quite shocking. I mean, why do you think that is? Is that because it is... I don't know, is it because flying is so much more necessary in the States, perhaps, in order to get from one part of the country to another? Or is it perhaps a different mindset, perhaps, where people aren't maybe taking it as seriously
I think it depends on the airport. As far as people taking it serious, it's all over the place. Where if you were to do a diagram, it'd be a shotgun here, because it's not even geographic or political or anything like that. You just have the entire spectrum of a complete. This is all a hoax, right? And
but Armando, the only thing I disagree with you over is I think it is very political, which I'm going to try my best to shut up over that.
Careful.
But I do. I just think that. So I would not discount the political part. Everything else I've agreed with you on.
Yeah, I would not discount it at all, because so I guess what I was getting at is here in the US, it depends on the airlines and where they're putting their weight of effort. So Charlotte, I think American Airlines has consolidated a lot of their operations into Charlotte. When I go to Atlanta, concourse A, B, C, and D are packed, but E and F might as well be part of a scary movie where it's just a ghost town. Pittsburgh Airport, when I was up there, was completely dead. So I think the airlines are consolidating their operations in some markets or some hubs. So when you're talking about the picture from Terminal 5 and how it's a little bit different here in the States, I think they've just consolidated that. Now, that's just exposing, or I guess increasing the risk of exposure at those airports. And I always think about the airport workers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hundreds of thousands of people coming through. It's the cleaners, it's the gate agents, it's the people working at the vendors that are seeing all these people all the time. But,
we're going to move on in just a moment, but I just want to whiz through the comments in the chat room, if I may, first of all. So Tony S. is a great point here, saying we're a small island. Most flights in the UK are leading to somewhere with quarantine measures. I think that's a very good point there. Stephen Ivey is saying that I'm an employed pilot and I had the choice to take leave and elected not to. Haven't exposed any of my direct family to anything, been doing it for 6 months. It's perhaps a shame that more aren't like you, to be fair, Stephen, I guess. So Captain Baha is saying that the airlines in the US, especially the one that rhymes with America, don't respect social distancing, partly because of financial reasons, but also partly because of the culture, which is an interesting take. It's actually, Armando, you may be able to answer this one here. Mike Williams is asking, just out of curiosity, what are the testing rules for pilots flying through different jurisdictions?
I don't think it depends on the airline. I think Delta Airlines, I know for sure, is offering some testing to their employees. My airline, nothing. There's no requirements for testing. There's no mandatory testings or documenting negative results or anything like that. So I think it just depends on the operator.
Indeed. And the last point before we move on is just from Alan White saying there's so much confusion here in Europe at the moment regarding safe countries, quarantine areas, and around the unsubstantiated dangers of air travel, hence the lack of bookings in Europe, which I think is another thing. This is the thing, isn't it? I mean, people are going away on holiday and then it's being changed, isn't it? It's like they'll be away on holiday and suddenly the rules change and they're all frantically trying to get back to the UK so that they can escape having to quarantine for 2 weeks, because let's be honest, most people can't afford the quarantine.
We were, as you know, Matt, we were due to fly to Malta yesterday for the air show this weekend in Malta, which has obviously all been cancelled. We were due to fly it yesterday, and we could have still, even though our EasyJet flights from Southend were cancelled because EasyJet pulled out of Southend, we could have rebooked with Ryanair and flown out to Malta today on a flight today out of Stansted for just the same money. But you've got that issue where, had we have gone out there, I would have had to have taken next week off work, the week after off work, and the week after that off work. Yeah, which is not good.
No, indeed. Right, we're going to move on. Armando, if you can take the next story, then please. This is
JetBlue.
Slightly better news from JetBlue, at least.
From the Point Sky UK. I didn't know there was a UK branch of the Point Sky.
There is now.
There is now, right? JetBlue Airways has adorned its first Airbus A321LR that will carry it to London next year with a new tail design dubbed Streamers that celebrates transatlantic travel. The design features waving ribbons in varying shades of blue that is meant to be both celebratory and bring to mind images of ocean waves and the jet stream. JetBlue told staff in an external communique on Tuesday that is shared with the Point Sky. Streamers will adorn the tails of all 13 of its A321 LRs that it has on order. There are some pictures on here. It is actually a very handsome design there. So the New York-based carrier remains on track to launch flights to London from both Boston Logan and JFK by late 2021. JetBlue aims to disrupt the market with a premium but affordable product similar to what it did with Mint on U.S. transcontinental routes. JetBlue executives have said that the airline will also unveil an updated Mint product on the A321 LRs for the new London flights. However, they are mum on the details of what the offering will look like. Very handsome airplane, and this is great for JetBlue. And I think with some of the other airlines that have failed in the transatlantic market, I'm curious as to JetBlue and the power that they have behind them. They know how to do low cost, and I'm curious if I think they're going to be successful at this. I really do.
If you want to take a look at the picture that Armando was talking about, unfortunately we couldn't get permission to show it here today, unfortunately, but it will be in the show notes. So do take a look at the livery that, or is it livery or livery? I'm never quite sure.
Livery.
We'll go with livery.
Unless it's livery in England, it could be.
Don't open that can of worms. Otherwise, we'll have producer John joining in as well. They pronounce different things differently where he is too. Anyway, that's all. But it's I don't know, a bit of good news though. Really, I mean. I presume. I mean, Jet2. They're not Jet2. JetBlue. Sorry, very Freudian slip there. So this is very much a sort of like a low-cost model.
They do. They started out as a low cost, and they're. I don't know, Brian. What would you say? I think they're on the high end of low cost here. Still got a little red microphone, Brian.
He's on mute.
Sorry, not anymore. Yeah, I don't think there is such a thing as a low-cost airline, because when you look at all the fees that they add on, it ends up being just about the same price anyway. So certainly Spirit and Frontier, you can get very expensive end-of-trip totals when you finish. So. And certainly the LA, New York, their minted service is I think quite competitive with the Legacy 3. So no, I actually wouldn't consider them a low cost airline.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I think try to sell themselves as a low cost, but
they're not.
I really like the JetBlue product. I like flying on JetBlue. I think they're just a great little airline.
Yeah, when I've flown on them,
Lane's saying you're supposed to spend money here, which I think is probably a good idea, isn't it? Certainly that's Ryanair's model without question.
Yes.
That's the object that they go down. Okay, Carlos, I think the next story is with you.
Yeah, this one is on theguardian.com, and casting my mind back to earlier. Well, blimey, quite a few years ago now, probably about 15 years ago now, when I first took my first flight in a light aircraft when I started to learn, and landing at Norwich Airport, which is not too far from me and Matt here, on a proper runway.
Is that the really expensive cup of coffee? Is that
that
right?
was a really fantastic experience for someone who's normally used to landing at small GA kind of airports around the area. But this story is the little planes that could. Sydney Airport opens up to hobby pilots during the pandemic. So the scarcity of commercial flights landing at Sydney Airport has been a disaster for airlines and workers. But for hobby pilots in Australia, the pandemic has provided the opportunity of a lifetime. The quieter than usual runways mean that private pilots have been given the chance to land at the international airport for the first time. When Sydney Flight College club captain Tim Lindley put out a call, he received no overwhelming response. He eventually organised for 14 light aircraft to fly into Sydney Airport on Sunday last week, with 40 people involved. For a lot of pilots involved, including this particular person, it was a childhood dream to land in a big international airport like that, like the Airline, as he said, Lindley. His group took off from Bankstown Airport, where many private pilots usually fly from, came in over Sutherland and landed at Sydney Airport. Although the runways weren't busy, Lindley and his crew still had to navigate some huge aircraft. He said that lots of the pilots had passenger jets waiting on the side of the runway, which might have been really funny to watch with these small little planes coming in, he said. He also said that when he was taxiing in, he had a Jetstar Airbus in front of him and an Air China 767 behind him, and we were all waiting for another one of the club's aircrafts to land. Lindley, who was flying a Cessna 182 with 3 passengers on board, had worked with the airport staff to make sure the pilots knew what to expect and how to approach an airport of such size. Coming into land at an airport like that, there are lots of optical illusions, he said, because it's such a long runway and because it's so wide, he said. The thing is, the airport is designed to have the pilot sitting 30 feet in the air, so we're sitting in a little aircraft and you're sitting maybe 1 foot off the ground. None of the signs are aimed at you, so it's actually incredibly disorientating, he said. The main runway stretches for nearly 4 kilometres, far longer than smaller aircraft need to land. Australia's largest airport usually has a cram schedule, making it almost impossible for private hobbyists to land at. Some private planes have landed at the airport in the past, but the airport's airfield operations supervisor, Nigel Coleman, said the pandemic had allowed the runways to be opened up like never before. He said, as our airfield is much quieter than usual due to COVID, we have been able to review each request and grant access, which for a lot of hobby pilots is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Coleman said. We've been able to open up conversations with light aircraft pilots because our airspace is much quieter than usual. The airport itself is experiencing 60 to 90 plane movements a day at present, a huge drop from the 800 to 900 that ordinarily use the runways. That significant drop has had a huge impact on the aviation industry, Coleman said. Pilots had to submit a flight plan and book a landing spot. Coleman and his team then had to adapt to the smaller aircraft and guide them in unfamiliar territory. He said that we're certainly not used to the smaller aircraft, so they keep us really on our toes, he said, when they arrive. Being smaller means they're harder to see than the jets and the turboprops, and they don't make as much noise, and it creates a positive challenge for all of us at the airfield, he said. For some of the hobbyists, he acknowledged, we're literally making their dreams come true.
And I mean, I'm trying to think the best scenario to sort of compare this to here. And I mean, Carlos, it would be very much like you taking in the little Cessna 152 or whatever it was that you were flying, just taking it to Heathrow.
Into Heathrow.
Yeah, taking it into Heathrow Airport.
Can
you imagine how cool that would be?
That's exactly what it is. It's these airports, and right when COVID hit and the slowdown or operations came to a screeching halt, as I said, I continued flying, and I would hear these general aviation. Now it is a chance of a lifetime to take a Cessna 172 into O'Hare or Atlanta Hartsfield or JFK, something like that. And people were doing it in those first couple weeks. Then the word got out, and the controllers, I think, had to put a little bit of a kibosh on it, because I remember flying into Baltimore Washington International Airport couple months ago, and there was a GA pilot that was requesting to do touch and goes at BWI. And yes, while technically we're a little bit different here in the US and the airports are public use and air traffic control is there to serve everyone. It got to be a little bit too much when there's a 172 trying to do touch and goes at BWI or Dulles or something like that. That they said, okay, everybody, we need to slow this down and do it during busy times.
Yeah,
because
Armando, could he have done 5 or 6 touch and goes on the one length of the runway?
Length of runway, yeah.
Yeah, you can absolutely, especially you get something like Washington Dulles or O'Hare that has 13,000 foot runways. You could certainly land at least 8 times. I think the short takeoff ground roll distance on a Cessna 182 is about 600 feet, and the landing distance is about 600 feet. So you do the math. So you can take off from a stop and land to a full stop in 1,300 feet, give or take. And yeah, you could do that a couple of times. You could bunny hop down the runway.
The landing fees at that point.
Yeah. There's an interesting stat here that, as I say, interesting thing from Alan White here is just added in the chat room. He's saying, so Cessna 152 rentals are at $220 per hour. Kingsford Smith International landing fee $14,500. There you are. That's a very. I was just going to say
on that subject, Matt, for the GA aircraft landing here at Norwich International Airport.
Is that Norwich, London?
Norwich, London, yeah. You're looking at around about 27 quid for a landing fee.
That's all right.
For that,
that's
which works
affordable.
out around about $34 for a landing fee here at Norwich Airport.
Yeah, I'm happy that these guys got an article published in The Guardian. I would be curious to hear what the Airbus pilot and that 767 pilot that were behind him.
I mean, that's quite a separation required, presumably. And also, all jokes aside, potentially a bit of a nightmare for ATC as well. I'm
just thinking. Caution, wake turbulence, Cessna 150.
Just a tad, I'd knock you out
on the tarmac.
Absolutely.
Yeah, much like Mila, who is talking about in the ATP. They're pushing the power up to keep up with the bigger jets. I fly a Pilatus into these airports, and I'm doing the same thing. We are full power within company limits to keep basically a 767's minimal approach speed, and those controllers are fantastic at working us in there, but don't mess it up, because if we slow down, if we mess it up, they're just going to take you out of the sequence, because there are 8 airliners stacked
breathing
up on
down
a runway.
Yeah.
And they're being, and I think Captain Al was talking about this, but they're being metered all the way from their destination. So if you're talking about an arrival in Atlanta, that aircraft is being told what speed to fly when, let's say he left Chicago. So somewhere over Indiana, he's already being told, hey, slow down to 250, slow down to 280, or speed up, because he's getting sequenced in to arrive 1 hour later. If anybody ever gets a chance to go to an air traffic control center or air route traffic control center, ARTCC, and see the metering person, it is literally the Matrix. It is just these stacks of aircraft falling from the top to the bottom of the monitor, and that's where those slots come in. So
I'll be honest, I don't know if I like the word falling in that scenario. I'll be honest.
Waterfalling? It's a waterfall.
Yeah, that sounds less threatening. Let's go with waterfalling.
Amazing.
I remember. I seem to
controllers
remember
are amazing.
in our. I think when we were chatting to Adam ages ago, and because was it Flybe still had a route that flew into Heathrow with is it their little Dash 8? Is it a Dash 8?
With the 8, the Dash 8, Q400.
Get me.
Yay. Oh, blimey, Matt, you stopped me.
See, I do listen sometimes. But I seem to remember he said it. He was saying actually rather enjoyed the challenge, and he was saying a lot that the Flybe pilots were really good about trying to get out of the airspace as quick as possible. Actually, Richard Adams is saying in the chat room here that Southampton always encourage GA visits when they do the AOPA tower visits, but £70 landing fee plus handling plus parking really limits limits the amount of people who actually take them up on it, which I'm not surprised about. But anyway, fascinating subject. We should probably move on to the
Moving
next
swiftly
story.
on to the next story, Brian. This one's again with you. This is another COVID story for you, Brian.
Dear.
Yeah, why did I get all the COVID stories today? Not like I'm opinionated
Because we
all
know
about
you'll
this.
comment on them. That's why.
Armando, what is that? Sorry, I was distracted.
Oh, hello. What are you up to, Armando?
This is pilot. This is my impression of Mila. This is Pilot Barbie on a Pilatus.
Right. Okay.
If you're listening to the audio podcast, sorry.
Yeah. I would say go and look it up on YouTube, but don't bother.
Quite distracting.
Quite distracting, yes. Anyway, you stopped Brian's flow there. Honestly.
So airline workers, Brian, why are they so amazing?
Yes, from Business Insider, airline workers have lower rates of COVID-19 than the general population. Again, ask a biased person, get a biased answer. The airline CEOs say it's proof that flying is safe. I scroll to the rest of the article here, since I just inserted my opinion. So the coronavirus spreads when people are in close quarters for extended periods of time, breathing the same air with little space between them. So you might expect airplanes to be the perfect environment for the transmission. But some surprising data from airline workers show that it's not the case. In fact, flight attendants and other airline workers have had lower incidence of COVID-19 than the general population. Can I stop and comment now, or do I have to save
one more paragraph, and then you can
Okay,
let
thank you.
All right.
Okay, so according to airline executives and union leaders, that's a sign the safety measures airlines are taking on airplanes are having an effect.
Okay, all right. Now before you explode, off you go.
Okay. So when you
deep
take a
breath.
look at all airline workers, you're talking about all the maintenance people that are being factored into here as well. So they're not just looking at pilots and flight attendants. And when you're a maintenance worker in a hangar, your exposure to people is significantly less than a flight attendant. So if you want to make an accurate story and use accurate numbers, use a reasonable, valid population of people.
Brian, are you suggesting that there's a slim possibility that statistics are being manipulated in order to highlight something that may or may not be financially beneficial to an airline, aviation / industry type thing?
There are two. If anyone looks up my,
I like how we
my
just glossed over that and moved on.
Yeah. No. If anyone looks up my resume or CV, they will see that I've spent more than half of my life either working for a statistics company and or being in the medical industry. So although I am not a doctor, I'm phenomenally opinionated over this stuff because of my work-life experience. So yes, as I started when I read the article, if you ask a biased person, you're going to get a biased answer. And when you ask CEOs if it's safe to travel, I believe they are going to say yes, it is, and they will manipulate the data any way possible to have that. A case in point, a very good friend of mine is a flight attendant for American Airlines. Guess how many times he has been tested for COVID-19 since January?
I would like to say at least once a fortnight, if I'm honest.
How about once in 6 months? This
Okay.
does not give me warm fuzzies. Now,
No.
Armando, as a pilot, how many times have you been tested?
Mandated by the company? None. Just on my own
Right,
volition.
mandated by the wife who's just across the table from you.
The company has not mandated at all.
Really?
Yeah, so therefore, I really have a hard time believing these numbers.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, if you want to put it in that sort of line it up like that, and I suppose yes, it sort of nonsenses the entire article, really. I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, again, this is. It's not really something I thought about, but I guess I just sort of assumed that people that were working in airports and and I guess I kind of assumed that there was some form of regular testing going on as part of the process, which is frankly shocking.
If you don't test, you will have very low numbers.
Well, yes, but you could say that about anything. You could say that about cancer and things like that. You don't test for it.
Yes.
Wow.
Therefore, you don't have it if you don't test. Yep.
Okay, that's I'm losing the warm fuzzy feeling all of a sudden.
No, okay, but here's another bit of maybe hopeful news that I'll inject into the conversation here. I was just recently at my my GP, my general practice physician, and we were talking about flying because unfortunately my mom is quite ill and she lives in Florida, and I was saying, so if you had to fly, how safe would you feel flying? And she says, well, oddly enough, my husband's a doctor and he lives in Michigan and he flies back and forth weekly. And for the past 6 months, he gets on a plane, Monday morning, flies to Michigan, does his work, flies back Friday night. And she said he wears an N95 mask on the plane, does not have anything to eat or drink on the 4.5-hour flight, wears another mask and a face shield on top of that, gets an awful lot of funny looks from most people, but he feels totally safe doing that.
Wow, okay.
And that's how she answered my question.
So, yeah, so I mean, I suppose that what the lesson we can take from that story then is essentially there are sort of self-regulatory things that you can put in place, if you like, to absolutely minimise the risk that you can get. I mean, actually, all jokes aside, hang on, because I got this for the bus driving, but I can't wear it because one of the problems is here. Sorry, this is going to work terribly on the radio, I know, but I actually bought myself one of these.
Goggles with a face shield.
Goggles, basically like goggles or glasses, because I can actually wear them over my glasses.
You're steaming up, Matt. You're steaming up.
And this is the problem, you see, because as a professional driver, and this would be the same for pilots and everything
Matt,
as well.
it's foggy. Put your fog lights
as
on.
I breathe out, of course, it's immediately fogging up. Which, from if you're a professional driver in charge of 52 other people's children, this is a serious issue where the thing is fogging up. So. Yeah, so I mean, there, as you say, but I suppose as a passenger, you could just put up with it, couldn't you? Really, and that would minimise that. I suppose you've got to do what you need to do in order to feel safe, and if that doesn't work for you, then you don't fly, I guess.
Yeah, and I also think that if you had a mask on or a bandana or something covering your mouth to direct the moisture from your air downwards from the plastic, and the temperature was regulated between the plastic and the ambient temperature, and that you're exhaling, it would fog significantly
Brian, are you suggesting
less,
that there's an awful lot of hot air coming out of my mouth? Is that what you're suggesting?
or just people in general?
Fair enough. Anyway, we could go on about this subject for ages and ages, I know, but we're rapidly munching through
next
our time.
story, Matt, and this one is we've covered green stories over the last
haven't.
few
In fact,
episodes.
we've hopefully, fingers crossed, Armando, we've got a fascinating interview hopefully lined up to talk about another example, not a million miles away.
But this is another regional size plane, isn't it, Matt?
Absolutely, yes. So I'm going to bash through this as quickly as I can. AIN Online is the website, and the headline is Heart unveils electric propulsion system for the ES-19 airliner. So Heart Aerospace on Wednesday unveiled the electric propulsion system that will power the ES-19 regional airliner. It claims will be ready to enter commercial service in the summer of 2026. The Swedish company, which is backed by EQT Ventures, also announced that it has secured a 2.5 million euro funding in financial support from the European Innovation Council Green Deal Accelerator Programme. The 19-seat ES-19 features 4 propellers powered by electric motors. The preliminary design for the aluminium fuselage fixed-wing model shows winglets and a T-shaped tail, and somewhat resembles a smaller version of the de Havilland Canada-7. According to Heart Aerospace, which is headquartered at Gothenburg's Save Airport, all electric aircraft will be able to fly around 400 kilometres, that's 217 nautical miles, and operate from runways as short as 750 metres, or 2,461 feet. It's expected to have a top speed of around 215 knots and a cruise speed of around about 180 knots. The company maintains that these low speeds will not be a disadvantage on short sectors, especially because the aircraft will be able to operate from smaller, less crowded airfields that will shorten the door-to-door journey times. The company was formed in 2018, initially as part of the Electric Air Travel in Sweden, the ELISE project, and funded by the country's Vinnova innovation agency, along with several other undisclosed backers. Its engineering team includes veterans of almost 70 aircraft programs, including Bombardier C series, the Honda Jet, and the Zanum Aero's electric aircraft. Testing has already begun with a ground-based prototype of the complete propulsion system, and a 20% scale model of the aircraft is due to start flight tests before the end of 2020. The program plan calls for a full-scale prototype, which will be quite close to the series production design, to start tests in mid-2024. The aircraft will be certified under the EAS, or EASA, sorry, I learned that last week, EASA CS23 standards. The manufacturer is in the early stages of applying for design organisation approval. Hart has developed its propulsion system in-house and is using automotive industry batteries as its power source. MT Propeller is providing the ES19 7-blade propellers. The company is in talks with several aerospace groups with a view to source cockpit systems and flight controls. The company claims that 8 airlines from across Europe, North America and Asia have signed letters of intent to purchase a total of 147 examples of the ES19. These include SAS, Brathens and Widerøe in Scandinavia, Air Greenland, New Zealand's Sounds Air, Pascan in Quebec, Quantum Air in California, and UK startup City Clipper. That's an interesting one. No mention of price here so far, but I mean, it's a fascinating project, isn't it?
I looked at this, their website. If you go on to the Hart Aerospace website, they've got a huge, glossy, lovely, shiny website profiling this particular aircraft. To me, it looks like a miniature ATR 72, but with 2 extra engines, obviously, because the ATR 72 has got 2 engines. But it's like a mini version of that. And I think, God, if they actually do,
if they pull it off,
pull it off, it's a fantastic regional airliner which would go down an absolute storm here in the UK.
I do have one
Europe.
Question that might spoil things, though. I mean, it's
batteries.
There is that. Yes, I mean they're talking about the options, if you like, with like the flight times and stuff. But I mean, certainly, ironically, I was watching an episode of Top Gear of all programs where they all bought second-hand electric cars, and the biggest issue here is the batteries. And of course, one of the other issues is how long will it take to charge it back up ready for a full flight? I mean, I suppose you'll have sort of industrial power sources and everything to be able to do so. But I mean, I don't know. Is the technology ready for battery powered aircraft? I'm not sure we're at that point yet. Are we?
I think we're at the point where we can have like a mix, Matt, with battery powered and standardized power, like fuel powered engine aircraft. I don't think we're at that stage yet where we can have a completely electronically powered or electrical powered commercial airliner. What do you think? Brian?
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that day. I think it's going to be a while. Companies like Sunflyer with their, little, 2-seater. I think I'm not sure if they've released their 4-seater yet, but Pipistrel has their small plane. I think they're getting there. Some of the things that I think will drive this are folks like the state of California is mandating by 2035 that all new cars sold in the state must be electric powered. So I think this is going to drive battery technology, which certainly seems to be the large limitation right now.
Indeed.
Yeah. Obviously, we had all the issues with the batteries with the Dreamliner back when they started and stuff. But I think battery stuff has come on a bit since then.
I mean, I love it. I mean, especially you think that the sort of commute that I do, for example, I'm doing 2 trips to Beccles a day at the moment. I mean, I would love to have a little electric runabout car. Because, I mean, for the commute that I'm doing, I mean, you'd still need the C-Max, like, to go to the airport or something like that, because I don't know if I could trust it just yet. But, for the little commute hop from, A to B, I mean, electric is definitely the future. But, I mean, mean, it's batteries, isn't it? That's the big issue.
Right, but
Matt,
even if it was, I'm sorry, Carlos, but even if it was gas electric, right, where you had some sort of a gasoline engine to get you the rest of the way, just in case if something happened or something to supplement the batteries, I think that's a nice bridge until the infrastructure is worked out, because of course you need charging stations everywhere in order to support this. I heard actually on the news this morning, going back to cars, but where Porsche now has a fleet of trucks that will go around and charge. And they said the truck itself has enough battery capacity to charge 30 cars in a rapid charge scenario.
Well, of course, taking it back to aviation, of course, I mean, the aircraft that the airports that these aircraft are flying into, of course, will no doubt have the infrastructure already in place for rapid charge, etc. Before, I mean, presumably they'll make sure it is in place.
Richard Adams does make a good point, though, Matt, that especially for us in the UK, there's no infrastructure in the UK for those vastly increased power demands, cars, heating, cooking, let alone power stations to produce. Margins are already very low, especially in the winter. It does make a good point if we suddenly have a glut of aircraft. I think
he's also suggested that what I need is a stretched milk float. That's the
it's a stretched milk float.
Suggested in the chat room.
And for the rest of the world, what is a milk float?
It's an electric vehicle. So for some reason here in the UK, it's literally the milkman delivers milk on a battery.
We were pioneering green travel in the 70s, 60s and 70s.
Yeah, there was this thing where the milk deliveries were done by electric milk floats. They were literally like
imagine
mini
a
vans,
van.
like.
Imagine a minivan, Brian, with not much of a front end, but just a flat kind of front end with glass windows and a steering wheel and a forward and reverse button.
Weirdly, this is going to be the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard in your life, but I appeared actually in a book and a programme on Radio 4, BBC Radio 4 of all things, for a programme that was called 3 Men and a Milk Float. And the reason why I appeared is I was running the King's Head Hotel in Bungay at the time, and they were going from Lowestoft to Land's End or something like that. I can't remember which way. Well, it was. I think it was they were going down. So they were literally going Lowestoft to Land's End essentially, and they were doing it in a milk float. And the idea was, the part of the journey, the experience was that they were having to find places to charge the vehicle up overnight, and one of the places they ended up was the King's Head Hotel in Bungay, and we allowed them to hardwire into our fuse board basically to charge the thing up. And
I just went to images.google.com, little plug there, and typed in milk float, and a whole bunch of pictures showed up. Now I know what a milk float is.
There we are.
This show is educational.
Indeed,
we try.
Yeah, that's the thing. At least like 60% accurate.
So the next story for Matt. This is obviously we've been listening to the stories in the last few months about the retirements of the 747s across the globe. But this airline, Matt, has decided rather than retiring, they're going to refurbish them.
Indeed, yes. Okay. So sorry, I'm not prepared because my show notes say that you were reading it, but it's not a problem.
Is it? I am sorry. Is it me?
Simpleflying.com.
Oh, it's me. I can't do it.
I'm ready if you like. It's all right. I've got it. It's fine. Simpleflying.com. And the headline is Airline Iran Air refurbishes one of its Boeing 747. That's fine. It's fine. You knock yourself out. You can have my military story. How's that?
Love you too.
Iran Air has reportedly refurbished one of its Boeing 747 planes. With the impending cessation of the US-led arms embargo, Iran is proceeding with its plans to expand its aviation capabilities. Excuse me. The airline accomplished the feat using local engineers only, showcasing its self-sufficiency. As one of several Boeing 747 planes in the carrier's fleet, it appears the other planes are still up for sale, as announced a few weeks ago. According to Iran's Mehr news agency, Iran Air has completed the refurbishment works on its remaining Boeing 747-200s. The aircraft, registered Echo Papa Indigo Charlie Delta, is a 32-year-old model and has been serviced with Iran Air. Has been in service with Iran Air since 2008. The refurbishment project is the first time in 6 years that the airline has conducted repair works on its Boeing 747 fleet. The project was notably worked on exclusively by Iranian engineers, experts, as a show of self-sufficiency in the face of economic sanctions. Foreign engineers and carriers are reluctant to do dealings with Iran Air due to the embargo. In a statement, Iran Air said, nevertheless, with the efforts of Iranian engineers, we have been able to carry out all repairs. With Iran Air's mammoth $9.5 billion Boeing 777X and $25 billion Airbus orders seemingly dead in the water, the airline may be exploring more economically viable options, including more refurbishment projects. So what will they use the 747 for? According to the airline, this particular 747-200 model is intended as a cargo-only plane. Tehran claims the plane has already made vital contributions to the nation, transporting aid during floods and flying crucial supplies for the fight against COVID-19. In the near future, Iran Air has claimed that the plane will conduct flights to and from the UAE. That's quite a bold claim, isn't it? Plans for Iran Air's other 747 planes look less promising. While they have been put up for sale, most experts speculate that they are too old to ever restore to working order again. Instead, they are likely to be used for their scrap value and taken apart. With a number of rare models in their 747 fleet, aviation enthusiasts will be sad to see them go. I won't go on because the rest is all about the history of the stories.
This particular aircraft, I was just looking at the history of this 747-200. Obviously, 400 is obviously the model that they're currently flying, say with BA, but they're getting rid of theirs. But this model, Matt, on this story was delivered back in 1988.
Oh my goodness!
To Martin Holland. It's had I'll tell you what. You talk about cars in the UK having like a few owners.
Yes.
This particular aircraft on this story, Matt. This was
on the logbook. There would be how many entries?
This was owned by Martin Air. Qantas owned this as well. Singapore Airlines, they had a little stint with this. ATC Airlines had a little go with this.
Wow.
Ank Air had a go with this. And then Iran Air got this back in 2009. But this actual aircraft first got delivered, I should say, to Martin Air Holland in September 1988.
Wow.
So, this 32 years old. This particular aircraft.
I don't know. I mean, that, to be honest with you, in the coaching world, that's not an unusual number, to be honest with you. But then, it's like most of these things. If they're well maintained from day one, then they don't, they don't perhaps deteriorate like most vehicles. I mean, it's only really the tech that gives away the age of the vehicle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, these 747-200s, Matt. The 400s that were all well versed in that BA have flown and BA Airlines. They have two pilots on the flight deck, a first officer and a captain. But these -200s actually have a third spot, Matt, with a flight engineer. So you have your captain and your first officer at the front, and just behind them to the right, if you look inside the flight deck, you've got a big engineers panel, which they control all the fuel and the engines and all the various controls. That's like a three pilot crew in effect on these -200s. Yeah, so.
Gosh.
And I bet all the other ones have already been cannibalized for parts, even though they say that they anticipate to cannibalize them. I bet they already have.
Yes, absolutely.
It's testament again, though, to the 747 look, guys. This 1988. They've done still incredibly well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Brian, you've got the next story, and this is a bit of a good news story, especially for this particular toddler.
Yeah, from Gizmodo and staying in that part of the world. Baby born on a flight to London gets lifetime ticket from Airline, which is kind of a cool story or cool headline when you read the beginning of it. So a newborn baby will get an early taste of what it's like to navigate the fine print in airline agreements. A woman gave it sounds like a setup to me. Yeah. A woman gave birth on an Egypt Air flight from Cairo to London last week. The company says her child will receive free flights for life. again, so far so good. The airline tweeted a statement explaining the woman from Yemen gave birth on Wednesday, September 16th, while traveling on a flight from Cairo to London. Wow, that seems redundant. The woman that has some name reportedly went into labor mid-flight, prompting the pilot to initiate an emergency landing while in German airspace. But this child was in such a hurry to reach personal destination, it was safely delivered before the flight could touch down in Munich. Egypt Air said in the statement that the newborn will receive free lifetime travel ticket. So far, so good. But in a later tweet, the airline relayed congratulations from the pilot, who was pleased to present the child with a free ticket for life on Munich flights. Ooh. It's unclear if the baby's birth bonus will only apply to flights heading to Munich, or it'll be a lifetime pass for any route that Egypt Air flies. We've reached out to Egypt Air for more details to clarify exactly how the ticket will work, but did not receive an immediate response.
Shock horror.
Yes. So, considering the fact that the mother wasn't even on her way to Munich, limiting the ticket, I love this line, limiting the ticket to traveling to the German city wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Oh. And God knows what other restrictions are placed on the lifetime pass.
Indeed.
Regardless,
and Alan White is suggesting that, terms and conditions apply, taxes and charges not included, obviously, as you would expect with anything like that. A lovely story, really. I suppose, it's. Yeah. Does this open the age-old question, though, of what is the nationality of the child? There you go. Because
absolutely, and certainly if the plane was overflying America and had to land in America, the child would certainly be American.
Yeah, true.
So there's no question there. But for things like this and how the European Union handles that, or Germany in particular, I honestly have no idea.
I suspect it will involve an alarming amount of red tape and paperwork.
Paperwork, yes.
Indeed. It's the UK's favourite subject. Okay, so on to the next story, and this is with you, Carlos.
Yeah, the executivetraveller.com, this one. And this one is especially for Steve and Grant McCarran over in Australia.
G'day,
and for any of our Australian... for any of us... Oh, sorry about that, guys. Apologies from that. This is for any of our Australian listeners, and especially for those Australian listeners who enjoy wine.
I'd love to get one of these. What are you talking about? No, that doesn't have to be limited to Australia.
What's wine
it's safe to say we're going to finish on a high with this last story.
I see what you did there.
This is on the executivetraveller.com website, and Qantas is selling 1,000 Boeing 747 bar carts that include wine. Yes,
the contents.
You heard it here. So here's your chance to bring a little bit of Australian aviation and history to your home or office in the shape of a Qantas Boeing 747 drinks cart. If you're thinking of turning it into a personal minibar, it comes fully stocked with 80 mini bottles of wine plus champagne from Qantas's business class cellar. Qantas is about to sell 1,000 of these Boeing 747 galley carts, which its engineers rescued from the red-tailed jumbos before they were flown to California's infamous Mojave Desert Boneyard. Each cart has clocked around 2,000 flights and travelled an estimated 15 million kilometres to the likes of London, LA, San Francisco and New York, Singapore, Tokyo and Hong Kong. So they're certainly not in mint condition. But
back to the mints again.
Yeah, but that's just part of their unique character and part of the story they tell. Other items, including emergency exit signs, phone handsets used by the crew, and galley control units, will go under the hammer at a charity auction at Qantas Sydney's Domestic Business Lounge.
I have both of those things in my studio right now.
You do?
I actually do.
Plain reclaimers, shameless plug.
Yeah, absolutely.
These will go under the hammer at a charity auction at Qantas Sydney Domestic Business Lounge on Saturday, October the 10th, ahead of a 7-hour Boeing 787 sightseeing flight. Phil Capps, Qantas Executive Manager of Product and Services, likes to think of them as pre-loved and ready to be adopted by those with an appreciation for aviation collectibles and an eye for design and wine. There's been a huge demand for Qantas 747 memorabilia, and frequent flyers have expressed their keen interest to convert the bespoke in-flight trolleys into everything from lampstands to storage units. The fact they come fully stocked with some of Qantas's most popular onboard service items will hopefully inspire some high-flying fun at home. Each Qantas Boeing 747 half-size bar cart includes 5 plastic drawer inserts packed with 40 mini bottles of Australian white wines, 40 mini bottles of Australian red wines, 1 full-size bottle of champagne, 1 sleeve of Tim Tams.
The important
What on
they're
earth
cookies
is a
or
Tim
biscuits,
Tam?
as you might call them. Yeah, they're
Biscuits.
chocolate-covered biscuit thing.
There we go.
They're actually really, really good.
Okay.
1 sleeve of savoury biscuits, 1 200 packet of smoked almonds, all lovely. 2 Qantas business class amenity kits featuring the Aspar Travel Essential skincare products, 100% combed cotton Sheridan throw made exclusively for
What on earth is
Qantas
a
first
combed
class.
cotton throw?
2 pairs of Qantas class business class pajamas,
Right.
1 medium large and 1 large and extra large. And if you want a smaller size, just give them a few washes in hot water. So the price for all that geek greatness is $974 $1.70 or 169,000 Qantas points if you're a Qantas frequent
Buy
flyer,
it with points.
which includes the all important bit, includes free delivery to
Right.
metropolitan locations is Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth.
And
There'll also be a
what if you want
small
one
number.
here in the UK?
They'll cost you a fortune.
Okay.
There'll also be a small number of full-sized carts with double the included items, which will sell for $1,474.70 or 256,000 Qantas points.
My goodness me. Now,
And so it just says executive traveller understands the 747 carts will officially go on sale at 8 a.m. when this story broke, which is Thursday, the 24th of September, which was yesterday.
oh, so they've been sold
And I
then.
think
Oh, dear.
they
And
have
have you
all
clicked-
sold.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you've clicked on the link, they're all sold out.
Right, okay. That's
It's
not a surprise.
so tragic.
Indeed. Megan is
Well,
suggesting
remember
that Megan is saying that Australians have way better blankets than the US airlines anyway, apparently. I don't know. Is that your comment there, Armando? I don't know what's going on.
Well, I was
there.
going to say, remember when we were talking to Andrew from Plane Reclaimers, he said that the beverage carts actually were one of their most popular items. But I think we could probably help him out if we asked him to stock each of the beverage carts that he's selling with a full load of wine. I think maybe they would get more
also
business.
sell out.
Sell
yeah,
a little
absolutely.
bit better.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
they are actually selling 7 different versions of a drinks cart on their website at the moment. Actually, on the
Again,
Planet
Megan
Cards.
has also pointed out, don't IKEA make these for much cheaper, which is probably
Actually, it's not got the, it's not
Carlos,
got
so
the
you could have a look
aviation
for me.
stuff.
You're going to IKEA tomorrow. You can have a look, can't you?
Monday, we're going Monday.
Monday,
Yeah.
my apologies. Jonathan Warner is very excited. He said, finally, wine and biscuits, finally a good commercial story. That's Armando. That's Jonathan Warner very excited. Stephen has suggested that it seems to have everything except for a cuddly toy in the in the choices there. It's quite a list. It's yes.
I guess I have to choose my word carefully because the live audience that I have in my house is my wife, but I would totally spend $1,000 on this.
You're brave.
Oh my
Yeah. Okay. Lovely.
If I could roll around a 747 Qantas 747 drink cart around the house.
Yeah.
Armando, that's exactly the reason why I looked it up to see if there were still any for sale, because I was getting ready to place my order.
What Megan
Yeah.
hasn't told you is that she would probably allow you to buy said cart, but what you would have to wear in order to have it, with the drink service, perhaps would be less appealing to you.
Well, yeah, I would have to.
Can you, Matt?
Just
can you
hope it's
point,
warm.
Point
That's
out
all I'll
what
say.
Matt. You got to just point out what Lane Street says in the chat room. There, does the flight attendant come
Does
with
the
it?
yeah, absolutely. No, well, in this case, Armando does. That's it. The first. That's,
I am going to, because as Brian said, I'm ever the optimist. I will take that as permission to also buy a Qantas 747 business class seat that we could put in the office.
Right.
And then she can get the full experience.
Right.
Right. Then she can sit in the business class seat. I'll come over with a drink cart.
And then what we'll do is we'll ship Owen over, who's a fully qualified fully qualified and trained flight attendant for the full experience.
Jonathan Warner says in the chat room, top story for today. Armando is now a single man after buying a 747 car.
I suspect there may be a little truth in that, yes.
Carlos, after Gemma leaves you because you bought an airplane window.
Good point.
Maybe we could just move into a flat together in North London.
Touche, Armando.
I think Racon has officially stolen it, saying that role play there at its very finest. Anyway, we'll move on before we get into trouble.
Wait, Matt, before you move on, I can actually answer the question over combed cotton.
Right, please do. Yes.
Being in the fabric business now, it's something that I know that I never would have known previously.
Right.
So combed cotton, they process it before it goes through the weaving machine, so it's actually softer. Yeah, you get all the fibers to line up in the same direction.
Well, there you go. You see, every day is in fact a school day.
A better quality cotton.
Better quality cotton. There we are. Well, that's what a marvellous place to end the commercial section on to.
Yes.
Carlos, we've got part 3 of something very special coming up next.
We have, yeah. For those of you who've been listening to the show over the last couple of weeks, we've been running a series of interviews with Ian Palmer. And this also is with a video so you can watch as well. But this time, it's part 3 of Captain Nick's fascinating interview with Ian Palmer as he speaks candidly about his battle with alcohol.
Ian, thanks very much indeed for joining me yet again. It's a great story, and I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, brilliant! Well, it's great to be back, and it's great to be talking about aeroplanes.
Oh, absolutely. Now, we left last part of the story with you getting a job with a great airline, with Monarch, and you realised after a while, though, that you still had a drinking problem. And I think you acknowledge now that definitely needed fixing. How did you accomplish that?
Okay, so I was flying a lot. We were doing a lot of these flights where we would fly late in the evening and to the Greek islands, arriving back at sort of 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, doing these charter flights. And I remember on the days off, never ever, I will reiterate actually, never ever in the aeroplane was I under the influence, but on my days off I couldn't wait to get home to drink. So I'd get home and I would be fairly out of it, and so I clearly knew in very short order that something wasn't quite right. I had a few relationships around that time. Nobody would stick with me, of course. Why would they? Everybody ran a mile. I started losing friends. And around this time, my parents, firstly, my father was diagnosed with, but he had fairly type 1 diabetes, so he was quite sick with that. My mother then was diagnosed with ovarian cancer that had spread to the bowel, lung and stomach, so that was stage 4 cancer straight away. And my father then, very quickly afterwards, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And I remember seeing my father on the Sunday night in hospital when we were told that he may not survive the rest of the week. And we were by his bedside on that Thursday evening, and he died on the Thursday. And again, I didn't feel anything. I had no emotions. Carried on. And this was 2010. England were playing in the World Cup. I remember it very clearly against the USA. And I remember watching a football game with my mum then in a hospice. And my mum died. The only thing I can say is that we were by her bedside, and this was very shortly after my father had died. My mother died. And
so
she died.
Two enormous tragedies.
Two enormous tragedies in very close.
In very short order, yes.
So it was. I mean, I remember pushing my mum in a wheelchair on oxygen to my dad's funeral.
Golly.
So that was truly the worst experience I think any human being could go through, emotionally.
But not something you were able to process.
Nothing. Well, I wasn't able to process it, and probably more importantly for somebody who suffers with this condition is I was unable to control it.
Wow.
And that was the issue. And it's a control. There's a control element to the alcoholic condition. So I then thought this was great because I didn't feel anything. Why did I think it was great? Because it gave me the opportunity to drink more and everyone would feel sorry for me. I wasn't at work now. I decided to withdraw from flying. Mm-hmm. So this was happy days for me. I could now just drink as much as I like because no one was going to bother me. That's how sick this illness gets. So I then did take up with a young lady who I knew from my childhood, and I always had designs on her, I think, from a young age, and I totally messed it up. She had a kid and I was awful, but I wasn't flying around this time, but she suggested that perhaps you need a bit of help. I was terrible to this lady, and I went to see my GP, who clearly knew what was going on, but he had written these sick notes basically to say that I was off work with stress, and this was when it really started to take a hold. I decided then, having been left an amount of money, and bearing in mind that one of the things we do with this condition is we like to be liked. We have a people-pleasing propensity. So I was giving money away. I was doing all sorts of crazy, displaying really crazy behavior. I decided to go to rehab, but there was a bit of a problem. We didn't have any money. I'd spent all the money.
Oh, Lord.
So how was that going to work? So I thought, I'm going to have a loan for this. And I was starting to get a bit more serious at this point, realizing that we're getting backed into a corner. And my accountant friend was an executor to the will. And he rang me up, knowing that all was not well, and said, we've found some more money in a pension fund, which your parents had. And in order to go to the rehab, the cost of the rehab was £14,000 for 28 days. Now, bearing in mind that the ego was still rife at this time, so I couldn't go to any old rehab. It had to be the Priory Clinic, because that's where all the rock and roll stars went, of course, wasn't it? So I thought it was really screwed up thinking. So it was £14,000. How much do you think was left in this pension fund, which the accountant found for me?
Well, I'm going to guess exactly 14,000.
Exactly £14,000.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly that amount. Is that odd? It's strange. Now, this was the first thought that maybe something else was happening. Now, I'm not religious or deeply religious, but I'm very spiritual, and I've realized that, there's something greater than me controlling this whole situation. I got away with so much during that time, and I was so lucky to get away with my life, because remember, this condition takes everything and will eventually take you. So I came out of the rehab, and the first thing I did, because the ego was still rife, I decided to test if they'd actually properly fixed me. So I celebrated with a bottle of champagne. Now, if that's not screwed up thinking, then I don't know what is, because I drank this alcohol. Of course, clearly, I was nowhere near aviation. I was nowhere near anything. And I was in a pretty bad state. So the doctor who was looking after me in this rehabilitation clinic gave me a telephone call, and he said, Ian, I'd like you to come in and have a chat. So the first thing I did was I was drinking litres of water, thinking this would hide any sort of alcohol or drug test. I had a shower, and I remember trying to clean myself, but I was really hot and clammy and in a real state. And I was quite bloated and really. So I went in a taxi, and I remember getting a taxi driver to stop and throwing up. And I got to the rehab, and the specialist, the doctor, consultant, sorry, who was looking after me there, he said, "Ian, sit down. We need to have a chat." And this was the turning point, because he said to me, and he didn't know whether I was flying or not, but he was aware that I had a license to fly an aeroplane, and I was effectively off work with stress. And this is the way you mislead people with this illness. You lie to protect the illness. So he said to me, "Ian, you have a choice. You can either stop drinking and fly aeroplanes, or you can continue to drink and die. Take your choice. Now you've got 2 weeks, and you need to tell your employer exactly what has been happening. Or you can go to the CAA and explain what's been happening, because if you don't, I will." And that was almost like a mallet over the head. And I was thinking at that time, and this is how screwed up my thinking was, I was wondering how I could manipulate the situation to get a gagging order over this person. So I was speaking to a solicitor friend. He said, "Yeah, it might be possible," but not realizing this was the guy that saved my life.
Yeah, I can understand looking back on it now, as this was the bloke that really was the catalyst to make you realize how awful the situation you were in had become.
Yeah. And what I will say is, around that time, I should say that just after my parents had died, and just before I had this experience of, I had changed employer. I decided to get away from Monarch, and they obviously are since no longer exist, to join Acme Airlines, the company that I'm with now. And they were, well, considering I was the new boy, I couldn't have wished for anything better, because I went to the union and I said, "Look, I've got a bit of a problem." And they said, "It sounds like you've got a bit of a problem." And they said, "Well, we need to, there is a drug and alcohol policy in place, as there are with any employer worth their salt. There'll be some sort of drug and alcohol policy." And so my union went to my employer and said, "One of your pilots has an issue." And they said, "Oh, right, okay." And he would like to, this is the most important thing, is that he would like to self-identify that he has an issue. There's a very big difference between self-identifying and being caught. Because if you get caught under the influence, that's instant dismissal. If you self-identify and say, "I've got a problem," then certainly with my employer, and I certainly know for every major airline in the UK, if not Europe, would have a duty of care then to say, okay, because they recognise under the World Health Organization that this condition is an illness, they would then do all they can to help you. And what they did, which I will be forever grateful, is they gave me a second chance. I went to rehab for a second chance, and this time I meant business. I joined the rehab, and what was interesting, there were 7 people then on this. I thought it was a course. I thought that I had to graduate, and a couple of people left, and out of everybody that was on that course in that rehab, one of them was quite an affluent businessman who has been sober now for the same amount of time, and he's gone on to do really well in business, and but everybody else has since died from this illness.
You're joking.
The other 5 people are dead.
Wow.
No longer with us. So I consider myself to be really lucky, and this wasn't a Priory type posh rock star rehab. This was a gritty, down-to-earth rehab where they also meant business. And if you didn't abide by their rules, you had consequences, which would be to clean a room, even clean a toilet. It was all about humility and instilling in you all that had been lost through my career in misleading people, in having a lifestyle which was totally incompatible with my career.
That's a remarkable thing to have to undergo, Ian. How do you look back on it now?
I look back at it and I think we have an expression of, well, I thank my higher power, which, yes, for me is God, but doesn't always work for everybody in that sense. But I thank my higher power that my life today is not different.
Absolutely.
It's massively different.
Oh,
it's
right.
it's a different world. It's a different world that I now reside in. I haven't had a drink for 8 years almost now, and do you know what, Nick? I have no desire to drink ever again. We have an expression. It's a bit like recoiling from a hot stove. You kind of burn yourself once, you don't go anywhere near it a second time. And now, for me, it's about passing the message on to other people. And I'm sure maybe some of your listeners and viewers will identify that, yeah, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to work out that I'm part of a fellowship, and that fellowship is very close to the front of the telephone book.
Yeah, I understand. And the requirements of being a member, as it were, are you certainly have embraced the opportunity to help others.
Yes, because we have a really lovely expression, and that is, I can only keep what I have by giving it away. By giving it away, by helping other people, by sharing what we call experience, strength, and hope. And I think Balpo, I was reading in their newsletter recently, their magazine called The Log, that actually this illness is 5% of people actually in the world who suffer with alcoholism show outward signs of it. 95% of people are hiding this.
Wow.
You would never know. You would never know, and they probably don't even know themselves. So it's a devastating condition, one from which you never, ever properly recover from. All you can do is arrest it. But what I will say is that today I have a life beyond my wildest dreams. And what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that I've won the lottery and I'm driving an Aston Martin and I'm now chief pilot of Acme Airlines. Not at all. What it means is I now have serenity and I'm now happy with my life. And I'm grateful. I have gratitude.
So is there any advice you can offer to those who are thinking that they might have a problem?
Absolutely. The first thing you have to do is acknowledge that problem. You have to say, yes, I have a problem. Second thing you do then is you ask for help. And you will find that, as I said, I was astonished the moment I admitted this issue, the way everybody came running. Now, remember that it's a condition that you manage. But today, I have a whole new circle of friends. I don't relate at all to the way I was. I'm in a new relationship, which I've been with Kirsty now for 5 years. And she says to me, I could never imagine you drinking. I could never imagine you being the way I described. It's almost as if, I don't mean in the religious sense, but it's almost like being reborn.
Well, that sounds fabulous. Have you been able to reconnect with your feelings?
Yes, yeah, because when you come into recovery, it's this classic expression that they have. We have two issues. Number one, the good news is you get your feelings back. The bad news is you get your feelings back. I start crying now when I see those adverts for the dog's home. So it's you get your feelings back, absolutely. But I have a very, very, very I had a very lucky escape, actually. I had a very, very lucky escape. What do I have to do now in order to continue on this lifestyle, with this lifestyle? Well, number one, rigorous honesty. Number two, actually more practically, is I have to see the regulatory body, Civil Aviation Authority, every 6 months for a blood test. Occasionally they'll take a hair test to check if there's been any misuse of anything in the meantime. Of course there hasn't been, and there won't be. But, it's a privilege now, it's a pleasure to go along there and submit to these tests, because every time I'm saying, yes, I'm well. Then they'll write me a letter and say, yeah, you are certified fit.
That's a brilliant story, Ian. But you touched on a new relationship, and I'm going to ask you to cover that in our next chat, because you ended up in hospital for a very different reason. And I think perhaps we'll leave it there and discuss that and how your career is going now in our next chat next week, if that's okay.
Brilliant. Yeah, it'd be a pleasure. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks very much.
Somebody say something.
It's safe to say there's loads more to come, and the stories do get.
We were so engrossed in that. It's just been a great series, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's also nice to see as well. Obviously, see Ian Palmer in his. I think it's in his home studio there, because he's got all kind of musical stuff in the background.
The geek in me was sort of going, I need to know what that microphone is. I need to know what
Yes.
I need.
Do you know what, Matt? Great minds think alike, because I was trying to see what that logo was on his microphone to see what he's using.
We'll have to message Nick
nice
to find out.
Nice to know.
Yeah,
it'd be nice to know.
Yeah. Why? Can I have one for the studio? Is that way? Can I have an upgrade?
You've got a good microphone in the studio.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So do you guys have an expression, something along the lines of, it's gone through the washing machine and it's come out the other side better for it?
I haven't heard that one.
Nothing at all, apparently. And with the look on Armando's face, we don't hear an American either. But it certainly seems like Ian has his story is that where it's truly amazing, and having come out the other end of the wash.
And with anything like that, of course, it's so brave to I mean, as he said there, he wants to, he's sort of definitely championing the story, if you see what I mean. That's why he's telling his story, because he wants to help other people, who have been struggling, and anybody who has the courage to be so open and honest like that deserves all our respect, I think, to be fair.
100%.
Yep.
Well done. But thanks for that, Nick, for bringing that to us as well. So big thanks to you, and obviously Ian Palmer as well. But we're going to hand the next part of the show over to Armando to introduce.
Yeah, the train is so far off the tracks right now that if you guys are still willing to do it, we can read some military stories.
The wheels have very much fallen off.
Well, Matt, if you're ready, hit the button. Let's go for it. There's a bunch of pictures with this one.
Honestly, he talked over his own intro then. Honestly, how rude. Just as well he didn't say anything he shouldn't have done.
All right, so this first military story, I know that the guys over at APG talked about it, and Juan Brown did a short video on this one too, but B-25 Old Glory crashed in California. The crew is fine. They just suffered minimal injuries, but the B-25 Mitchell Old Glory was seriously damaged when it struck an irrigation ditch during an off-airport landing attempt near Stockton, California. 3 crew members on board were injured. 2 were taken to the hospital, but fortunately, all injuries are non-life-threatening. So Old Glory is a North American B-25J Mitchell, built in 1944. And as I learned from Juan Brown, this aircraft actually did serve in, I believe, in the Mediterranean in World War II. So it's a true veteran of World War II. This accident is still under investigation. It just happened. It's a developing story, but there is some ATC recordings where the chase plane was a Bonanza that was following this aircraft. They had gone up to, Brian, correct me, it went somewhere near Vacaville, I believe, and did a demonstration or a lunch fly-in type thing, and then came back to Stockton. So pretty short flight. from what they know, they didn't get any fuel up in Vacaville, but that will always be the first thing when you have a simultaneous engine failure on a twin-engine airplane or a multi-engine airplane. Obviously, some kind of fuel issue will be the first thing that they look at amongst everything else. Obviously, it's probably a compounding emergency, but it's just a terrible loss for the aircraft. You know, when the B-17 went down in Connecticut, or was it Massachusetts? Last year,
I think it's Connecticut.
Connecticut, yeah. The importance of these aircraft staying in the air and the just benevolent organizations that continue to keep these aircraft flying. It takes so much money, so much volunteer effort that it's always just a complete shame when one of these aircraft end up in the dirt like this.
There's so much.
I don't know what their plan is for this one, but hopefully they're able to.
Judging by the pictures, I would hope that they can.
Yeah, it doesn't look like I don't know. It's hard to tell. You know, if there's a lot of fuselage damage, it could be a total write-off. But I've also seen B-17s that have been stripped down to the ribs and been built back up from scratch. So I hope that they're able to get this airplane back in the air in a couple of years and be able to raise the money to do that. So
we've actually got one of these in the UK, Matt. We've got there's one of these in the American hangar at Duxford,
right?
And there's also a B-25J, also at RAF Museum at Hendon as well. There's one of those in the UK. But yeah, it is sad, like you say, Armando, to see something that's probably had a heck of a lot of time and effort put into restoring to get it flying, and then obviously to have this happen is very sad.
Yeah, this particular aircraft actually had an off-airport landing in Reno at the Reno Air Races during an exhibition back in the 80s, I believe.
So it's well practiced at this.
Yeah, and, you know, it does give hope that it's able to get back in the air. So
fingers crossed.
Unfortunate, but
yeah, I think
glad that the crew is safe.
Yeah, as far as American bombers go, I think it's one of the more beautiful ones. I just love the lines on the B-25. So,
one of my favorite movies ever is Forever Young with Mel Gibson, and in that movie he flies a B-25. And I remember as a kid watching that movie and absolutely falling in love with the B-25. And of course, it's famous for so many other missions, you know, especially the USS Yorktown and Jimmy Doolittle flying it off the deck of an aircraft carrier when the airplane was not designed to do that at all, and struck back at the Japanese in World War II. But just a long storied airplane that served in so many theaters and continued to serve after World War II. Many of these went over to fire bombing missions or fire attack missions, just like the P2Vs and just a lot of these big, super powerful A-26 big radial engine twins that had a long career after the war. But there's, you know, just every year there's just a few less flying.
True.
So next story is on the dragonladytoday.com website. And good news for Jonathan Warner and anyone who lives near RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire here in the UK. The U2s are moving to Fairford. It is now 1 year since the 99th Expeditionary Reconnaissance Squadron, ERS, began to move from Al Dhafra base in the UAE to RAF Fairford here in the UK. Since last November, the squadron has been busy flying operational missions in an eastward direction. Fairford is an RAF airbase in name only, since it operated by the USAF. It houses occasional deployments of B-1s, B-2s and B-52s. And Fairford is best known for staging the annual Royal International Air Tattoo, or RIAT as we like to call it here, which is the world's largest military aviation show. Today's 99th ERS has only 2 U-2s on strength. Nevertheless, it's flying a busy schedule. One aircraft is dedicated to operational missions, while the other is kept in the slick configuration without sensors and are used for pilots' currency flights. The nickname Arctic Dragons, which may be a reference to the British climate, which is considerably cooler than that enjoyed by the 9th Wing personnel at their home base or at the 99th's previous base in the desert. It could also refer to a mission, by the way, to the Barents Sea to monitor Russian military activity in a strategic area. However, the most 99th ERS missions have been in the Baltic Sea region to monitor an area where east-west tensions are on the rise. There are normally 8-hour flights and sometimes coincide with NATO exercises in the area when Russian defences are most likely to be active and emitting. Being a British airbase, Fairford is often surrounded by aircraft enthusiasts, Jonathan Warner, observing the action with their radios and photo equipment, Jonathan Warner. The personnel of the 99th ERS obviously have a sense of humour. They have designed their informal Friday patch and the pencil pocket patch that is worn on the arm of their flight suits to show the long camera lenses poking over the airbase fences. The formal 99th ERS patch features a fiery dragon, of course, and is topped by a crown to acknowledge the British basing. And obviously, Mr. Warner will probably on eBay trying to find one of these patches.
In fact, Mr. Warner has indeed been in touch, and yeah, there's carry on talking because I've got a slight technical issue that I need to deal with. So.
Yeah, for anyone who is lucky enough in the community to have met Jonathan Warner, and we obviously mentioned him a little bit on the show, he does take some fantastic photographs of said aircraft, and he's also one of the regular visitors every year to RIAT, which unfortunately this year, as most of you know, didn't go ahead due to the current climes we are.
Oh, is there something going on? Oh, I didn't know that. There you go. Every day's a school day, isn't it? Yeah. No, he's just. I'm just trying to get this to come up because he's literally just sent me a pic. Literally the story that we're talking about here, and he's saying. So these are. Oh, come on, you silly! I love it when technology goes wrong, don't you?
While you're getting that up, Matt, I think there's obviously a long history of American aircraft serving over in the UK, and RAF Fairford was one of those bases that when I first got over there in 2006, and I served 4 years over in the UK, Fairford was all but shut down. It was considered a warm base, a forward staging base. Many of the buildings had been just shuttered up, and it's interesting to see this resurgence at RAF Fairford. And now, but when they were talking about closing Mildenhall, some of the tanker aircraft were going to move to Germany. Some of the reconnaissance aircraft were going to move over to RAF Fairford. And now to see a pseudo-permanent presence by the U-2s and the 99th Expeditionary Reconnaissance Squadron, which is their home wing, is the 9th Reconnaissance Wing out of Beale Air Force Base, California.
And Jonathan says this was taken at Fairford, so this is a U2 at Fairford, which is why it's relevant to the story, really. If before we move it smoother, it would have been so much more impressive.
So before we move on, I've got to say I did send Armando some pictures. I think it was last week or early this week, Armando. But I do get the chance to go frequently over to RAF Bentwaters, which is obviously now a decommissioned site here in the UK. But it's still awesome to see that which was the base of the A10s. Back in its day here in the UK, it's just awesome to be on one of those sites with the where the aircraft used to be. And
Tony S actually brings up a good point in the chat room, which is it'll be interesting to see what the future of RIAT will be as the base gets busier. Yeah, that's certainly I guess something to think about, because even Mildenhall had open houses back in the 80s and the early 90s, but then shortly after 9/11 they pretty much closed the base down. And Fairford, the same thing. If they're going to start running reconnaissance missions and bomber missions, I know Jonathan Warner sent us some fantastic pictures of some B-52s out there. But yeah, as the base gets busier and busier, it's increasingly likely that big events like RIAT will have to move somewhere else. But
I'll tell you what, guys, I really hope that in 2022, which is when it's supposed to hopefully happen again, we get the chance to go over to Pittsburgh again, Matt, to the show there with Rick Bell.
Yeah, indeed. Anyway, we need to move on, guys.
Brian, next story.
If we're not careful.
I will make this one really fast because you guys gave me the story with a whole bunch of words that I have no chance of pronouncing whatsoever. So basically, two Soviet jets were dancing around in the sky and one shot down the other one.
Okay.
All right, Carlos, the last story is with you.
Wait, did I miss out on anything?
That was two
pretty much summed it up.
Su-35 flanker jets, that gunned down an Su-30 flanker jet during close air combat during a training mishap. So
there are 4 paragraphs explaining how there's not a lot of information on this. So,
and how one flanker shot another flanker,
right?
Or he flanked up.
He outflanked the other flanker.
Indeed. Okay, Carlos, on to the last story then, please.
Flanking aircraft.
Don't call me Shirley. Anyway, this last story on the bbc.co.uk website. Major military exercises taking place off Scotland. So any of our Scottish listeners may be wondering what all the noise is about. So exercise Group X involving the Royal Navy's new aircraft carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth, has already started. Joint Warrior, running from the 4th to the 15th of October, will form part of Group X and will include naval units from Australia and the US. The Royal Navy said its units would observe current COVID-19 guidelines, which means the aircraft carriers will be 2 meters apart, hopefully. And the Royal Navy said that the units are obviously, it says here, COVID-19 guidelines. It says a wide range of measures to reduce the impact and risks of the infection have been put in place to limit port visits during the exercise. The Royal Navy says visits will only be made for operational and logistical reasons. Group X started on the 21st of September and will mainly take place off Scotland's east coast. It'll finish at the same time as Joint Warrior. The Ross-built aircraft carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth, is leading what is called a carrier strike group. Warships from the UK, US, and Netherlands form part of the group. The carrier is carrying 15 F-35B stealth fighter jets and 8 Merlin helicopters. The Royal Navy said it was the largest concentration of fighter jets to operate at the sea from a UK carrier in almost 40 years. The jets are Royal Air Force and US Marine Corps aircraft. The Joint Warrior is one of Europe's largest NATO exercises and is held twice a year in spring and autumn. This year's first staging of the exercise was drastically pared down due to COVID-19 pandemic, with only a handful of countries involved, and all the training was held at sea. Next month, Joint Warrior will largely take place at sea, including in the Moray Firth. But 130 ground troops will be training at military ranges and maritime exercises areas on the east, west, and north coasts of Scotland. And overall, Group X Joint Warrior will involve more than 6,000 personnel, 30 naval units from countries including Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Lithuania, Norway, and Portugal, and 81 aircraft. And some of the aircraft will be flown out of airports at Prestwick, Ayrshire, and Stornoway in Lewis. So it's safe to say anyone who loves their military stuff and lives in Scotland will get a damn good view of what's going on in the sea.
No, I can imagine. It's going to be an interesting sort of project. But it's a shame it's had to be sort of dialed down, of course, because of what's been going on, But then I guess that's sort of, everybody's got to do this as safely as they can while this weird thing is all going on.
So, Matt,
I think just real quick, Carlos, what we're seeing here, I think most of our listeners are pretty loyal. They've been listening for a while. So now we're going on
2 hours, yeah.
We are going on 2 hours. We've been talking about the acquisition of the F-35s by the UK for a while now, and you're seeing real time how long it takes to get these aircraft operational or to fully operational capability. There is a lot of training that needs to go on, not just for the pilots, but for all the ground crews and all of the operations staff if you're going to buy an airplane that has all these capabilities, now you have to exercise it in those capabilities for so many months until you can finally put the gold star on the price tag and say, yep, it does everything that we bought it to do.
Indeed. It's as I say, it's one of those things, isn't it? We're never going to know truly what is involved to try and get sort of these things operational, isn't it? It's so much goes on behind the scenes, isn't it? Before that aircraft takes off for the first time from a hangar, for example.
So with a change to normal kind of aviation style chat, but we're going to stick with something that does affect aviation. Matt, what's this next segment all about?
Yeah, indeed. So our next segment is basically, I'm sure you've all been very much enjoying the Plane Truths series that we've been running with Captain Al. Captain Al has been a little bit busy over the last couple of weeks, so unfortunately we haven't been able to get the next batch recorded. But many of you will remember that very recently we were joined by Dan Holley from a company based here in Norwich called WeatherQuest to help us with a couple of said segments. While we were chatting off camera, we were talking about weather in general, and Al and I are both very keen in what Mother Nature's sometimes destructive power can do to this wonderful world of ours. Whilst we were chatting, Dan mentioned that every year he usually takes a pilgrimage to the States to indulge in his rather unusual hobby of storm chasing.
Yeah, it's not everyone's cup of tea, admittedly, but yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to chase storms for 2 weeks on end in the Great Plains of the US?
Really? Okay. So, I mean, obviously, weather here in the UK is frankly boring. Let's be honest. It doesn't do.
Although, to be perfectly honest, it has been quite exciting over the last few weeks.
Yeah, doesn't happen very often though.
No.
I saw some quite. Well, I suppose frightening statistics of the number of lightning strikes that the UK had sustained over a sort of 12-hour period recently, and it was quite phenomenal.
Yeah, and unusual really for the UK. You don't get this sort of setup very often, and it is more akin actually to the type of storms that I would go chasing in the US.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was last week we had a phenomena here in the northwest of England that we generally don't see, and I don't know what the proper sort of meteorological term for it is, but effectively, dry lightning, where, you're having a thunderstorm, but without any rain, but an awful lot of lightning. Does that particular thunderstorm have a technical term?
I've heard of a dry thunderstorm before. Some people call it heat lightning as well. And that's basically where you see the lightning, but you're not actually getting the rain. And the main reason for that really is the base of the thunderstorm is so high up. I mean, those storms were around sort of 10,000 feet bases, and a lot of hot, dry air underneath that. So most of the rain's actually evaporating before it even sort of reaches the ground. So you get all the lightning, but not much precipitation, which, can cause some wildfires occasionally if it occurs over some, very dry land. The lightning can strike the land, set a fire off, and there's no rain to put it out. So it can be quite dangerous in that respect, depending on where it obviously happens.
So, I mean,
it was quite amazing because I was driving home at around about 11:30 midnight, and this storm was happening sort of all over Cheshire. And the number of people at midnight that were out with their camera phones, taking pictures and videos, which just sort of amplified to me how rare this was in the UK. I mean, you see it a lot in other parts of the world. You get a lot of it in an area of Europe that we call Thunderstorm Alley, which is Croatia going into Bosnia and Serbia. But yeah, very, very unusual in the UK and quite impressive to see, actually.
Yeah, and I saw many people's accounts saying, this is the best storm they've ever seen on that night as well. So I'm rather jealous that I wasn't able to see that from here in Norfolk.
I mean, one of the joys of being an airline pilot is that we quite often get to see thunderstorms from above them. So it is literally at night, it is a fantastic light show beneath you. Now, we do fly quite a lot above thunderstorms, but one of the things I'm quite often minded of is that when passengers are looking out the window and they see thunderstorms, because it's dark all around them, they look a lot closer to them than they actually are. And when I say to the cabin crew, oh, don't worry about it, that thunderstorm, yeah, it looks pretty frightening, but it's over 100 miles away. And they go, no, it's just over there. And you go, no, I'll show you on the weather radar. There it is there. And it's 100 miles away, but it just looks so close. But yeah, I've spent many a night sat, 6,000 or 8,000 feet above a thunderstorm or a series of thunderstorms that have, occupied several hundred square miles of landmass, and it's all just lighting up. And there are periods where it's almost daylight on the flight deck with the intensity of the lightning. I'm guessing you've not been lucky enough to experience that yet.
There's one occasion I can think of flying back from America where There was a big thunderstorm complex that had developed over much of the continent, actually. And we were trying to get around it. So we were flying basically from west to east along the Gulf state coast there, Louisiana, Alabama, that sort of thing, and trying to get around this complex. And it was flashing like mad. And, I just wanted to sit there and look at it out of the window. But I remember a flight attendant actually told me to pull the thing down. So I couldn't watch it. I don't know why. They didn't really say why, but I was gutted. I couldn't just sit there and watch the lightning going on.
You're scaring the children, young man. Put it away.
Family show.
Don't say that. Please don't say that. I have to pay APG some money now, apparently. The contract's all gone horribly wrong. Now you alluded to that. So where is it that you go storm chasing in the States, Dan? I mean, as I say, the weather here is not great for stuff like that. So, do you go to the same location, or do you plan in advance, like where you're going to go based on like the forecasts?
Yeah, so we used to fly to Dallas. That was our usual sort of starting base. And it depends on what time you go. So just to put a bit of context, the storm season in the US runs from about April through to sort of July time. And it starts in the southern states at the beginning of the season. And then as the jet stream migrates north through the spring and into early summer, the focus for the severe storm shifts north into the northern plains. And then by July and into August, it's sort of Canada that's getting the severe storms. So you can still get some pretty decent stuff in Canada if you wanted to go chasing later on in the season. So if you're going earlier in the season, you want to go to an airport that's further south, such as Dallas. And then if you're going later on in the season, Denver's usually a popular choice. So, Dallas for me for the early seasons, but actually in the last few years, I've opted for Denver. So that's where you start, that's where you land, obviously, and then you just go wherever the storms happen to be. So, on day one, you may be lucky and find it's fairly local, or it could be hundreds of miles away and you've got a long journey to get into position to chase some storms on your first day.
So what's your procedure then? So you've chosen, you obviously got your, are you moving like to different motels based on the forecast that you've got in front of you? Presumably there's not a great deal you can plan in advance with a trip like this.
No, that's right. It is effectively just a big road trip where you don't know where you're going to end up at the end of the day. And the next day you'll just take it when it comes. You're focusing just purely on a day-by-day stage, I guess. So a typical day would start by looking at a lot of observations, radar, satellite, lots of model output as well in the morning, and trying to pick out where I think these storms are going to erupt that afternoon. Most of the time they generally develop sort of mid to late afternoon once you've had peak daytime heating going on. So you pick a target, usually somewhere that has a lot of good road options. So you don't want to pick somewhere that's just sort of halfway along a road with no other roads coming off, because if something goes up it quickly, then you want to get there quickly as well. So you pick a target. On occasions, it could be sort of 5-6 hour drive away from where you're starting the day, just depending on what the weather setup is, really. And then you sort of spend the morning driving there, have some lunch. It's a bit of a waiting game. Obviously, some days convection, which is the showers and thunderstorms, will fire fairly early, but other days it could be as late as sort of 6-7 o'clock in the evening sometimes. So it ends up being a sort of sit around and wait really for things to develop. And then once things start to develop, you then head off towards these storms and just sort of track them over the subsequent hours into the evening hours.
So, a huge amount of this must be, to a degree, I guess, pot luck, because like we were alluding to earlier, obviously you're never really quite sure where the thunderstorms are going to appear, for example. It must be so frustrating sometimes to sort of get to see what you've basically gone out there to do.
Yeah, and those that come chasing with me will know I'm always doubting myself. So when you're sitting there, in the afternoon waiting for something to develop and nothing's really developing yet, you then start thinking, have I made the right decision? Should I have gone to this place instead? And all sorts of doubt comes into your mind. But usually if you go with your gut, more often than not, it will pay off. There are some days, obviously, where it doesn't quite go to plan, and that's just part of it, really. But you learn from those mistakes and develop better as a person, going forward in your forecasting. So not only is it a great way to see what Mother Nature can do, but also it's a good challenge for you to get better at forecasting as well.
It's just such a fascinating subject. It's the first question I've got to ask really is, what is the best storm that you've actually been able to witness?
Oh, that's a difficult question. Probably for me, the first tornado I saw, just because, it's your first tornado. It was 4 years in. So my first chase was in 2012. I didn't see a tornado until 2016. So contrary to popular belief, there aren't tornadoes roaming all over the Tornado Alley. They're actually quite hard to find. So you have to go quite a lot. And it may be pot luck. If you go during a 2-week period that's very active weather-wise, then you may see several tornadoes. But if you happen to have booked a 2-week period, which is very quiet, then it's just pot luck really as to what you see. But yeah, for me, it took 4 years to see one. And the first one I saw was still several miles away. It was a tiny little thing on the horizon. It lasted about 10 seconds and then it was gone. But at that moment, just that excitement is like, oh my God, that's a tornado there.
A tornado.
It
Wow.
was quite exciting.
I mean, I suppose potentially there is an inherent risk with this sort of thing. I mean, we've all seen those horrendous films like Tornado and stuff where they're all ripped up into said tornado and stuff. And I mean, obviously in the States, they do get these tornadoes and they are, they do destroy mass land, don't they? The damage is very severe at times. I mean, are you aware of any stories where people have been hurt storm chasing?
Yeah, I think up until 2013, there hadn't actually been any fatalities from storm chasers. You can stay relatively safe as long as you know what's going on. So you need to make sure that you're not too close. So generally speaking, you want to be probably about half a mile to a mile at the closest to these where the potential tornado could form. So those that are chasing know which parts of the storms. These are called supercell thunderstorms. And they are basically rotating thunderstorms. You know which part of that storm could produce a tornado. It's always in sort of the updraft area. So you want to stay usually southeast of that because these storms run southwest to northeast most of the time. And that means you can then stay away from getting caught out by it and also be aware of your surroundings. Where are your exit routes? How far away are they from you? To the nearest paved road, of course, because a lot of roads in the plains are actually dirt roads. Right. And if they get very wet, you can get quite stuck. So that's something else you have to be wary of. And also, you can get some pretty large hail coming out of these things, even in sort of clear air. These big thunderstorms can chuck hail out the side, which can batter your car sometimes as well. So that's something else to be wary of. But overall, you can stay relatively safe as long as you are aware of what is going on around you. And as I say, fatalities from storm chasers are relatively rare. And that particular event in 2013, it was the widest tornado ever recorded that caused that. And it rapidly grew in size and turned to the left of its motion that it was moving in. So it caught a lot of people out because of its sudden change in track and size that caught some people out. But that doesn't happen very often. As I say, most of the time you can stay relatively safe.
Wow.
Now, I'm intrigued. Your car rental transaction must be quite weird. You must go to the desk and go, I need a van to get all of my kit in. It's got to have off-road tyres in case I get stuck on a dirt track and it gets a bit boggy. And it needs to do 0 to 60 in less than 5 seconds so I can get out of Dodge.
You want an 18 van. That's essentially what you want, isn't it?
And what you don't want is a sunroof. Because if you've got big hail, that could smash that up, and then you've got all this water coming in your car. So that's one of the big things that we make sure we don't get as a sunroof.
I mean, as you can tell there, guys, we had an awful lot of fun recording some of those segments. We've got a couple more parts of that. Typical Al there. You can always rely on him to,
Captain
to
Al,
sort of
legend.
lower the tone, can't you? Absolutely. Yeah. There we go. But my personal thanks to Captain Al and Dan Holley for that.
Yeah,
Great chat.
well
We've
done.
got a couple more parts of that to come. We'll be bringing that to you again in the coming weeks.
So we've just got a short piece of listener feedback to play you out now for obviously the Aviation in My Life that we had the competition a while back in episode 324 with the plane reclaimers. So this week we've got a very short piece of feedback from Jenny Parkinson all about aviation in her life.
Hello, Jenny in Rome here. I just felt I wanted to enter your competition, so a quick thing. For me, what makes an av geek? I think it's jumping up whenever you hear a plane go by and rushing over to the window or the balcony, falling over things in my haste to get there to have a look, not always being able to identify them, like the military grey plane that went by with 4 engines overhead this morning down at the seaside. but it gives me a thrill to. Always gives me a thrill to see an airplane in the sky. And I'm so sorry I can't fly anywhere right now, but still, it'll all come back again. Bye for now.
And I think we're all in that same boat there, aren't we? Really, we're
Hello,
all
Jenny and
missing
Rome
being
here.
able to fly.
I just felt I wanted to
I
enter
can
your
remember
competition.
even today at work, getting outside the lorry, hearing something up above, and I'm just standing there looking up. And then the phone comes out, flight radar 24.
Yeah, quickly work out what it is. Yeah, absolutely. Away they go. Yeah. Okay, we need to wrap up, boys and girls.
Yep. So we're going to start to bring the show to a close. Episode 337. So, social media links. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Search for Plain Talking UK. Don't forget that all important WhatsApp number +44 757 22 49166. If you want to get your picture on the green screen behind Matt in the PTUK studios, you can send your aviation related pictures to that number. You can also email the show, podcast@plaintalkinguk.com. Send your emails into there if you want to send us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Also, don't forget the website, www.plaintalkinguk.com. You can go to the website, click on, there's links on there for the shop. If you want to get yourself one of our PTUK mugs, you can order yourself one of our coffee or tea mugs on there, as well as our wonderful PTUK t-shirts with the embroidered logos on the front and the print on the back. And you can also find on there as well links to our Amazon link, so you can purchase stuff on Amazon, which I have done tonight. You'll be pleased to know, Matt.
Right.
While we're doing the show.
Let me guess, a gin by any chance?
No.
Gemma will be furious.
You can also find the links on there if you want to become a Patreon of the show, if you're not already a Patreon of the show, which helps us to cover all our fees for running the show, and also helps us to bring the show each week to you guys and girls out there. So if you want to become a Patreon, the links are on there. Or if you want to make a one-off donation of a quid or £2 or whatever you can find behind the sofa, you can click on PayPal and send you a donation through PayPal on the website as well. Don't forget as well to follow all of our guests, I should say, our guests tonight on social media. Brian Coleman, where can people discover you on the social medias?
Nowhere. I am antisocial. Do not.
He's antisocial.
Yeah, do not participate in social medias. But for an email, you could always send an email to brian@airplanegeeks.com. Also, if anyone is truly interested in an aviation-themed map, including a mask, including a Star Wars one.
Very exciting.
Yeah, there's a bunch on the website, and that is tabfabric.com. And there's the special edition one. So if someone is really interested and wants to send an email, these are not listed there, but there are planetary ones. Oh. And you can choose your planet, so you could actually have Uranus on your face if you wanted.
Right. Okay. Good. Social media, other social media, to follow Captain Al. Oh, he says glossing over and moving on. To follow Captain Al, if you're not doing so already, why aren't you? At Airbus_Al. So that's at Airbus_Al. Dan Holley, who's featured a couple of times now, and obviously with our wonderful storm chasing. You can follow what he gets up to working for WeatherQuest by searching for at Dan Holley, all as one word. That's HOLLEY_. So it's at Dan Holley_. And yes, that's. Make sure you give him a follow, because I'm sure they'll really appreciate any follows.
So a big thank you to everyone who's joined us in the YouTube chat room tonight. A big thanks to you all our family in there tonight. Great to see everyone in there tonight. Thanks for taking time out on Friday to join us in the YouTube chat room tonight. Big thanks to everyone who also downloads the show as an audio podcast each week. Thanks to you. And don't forget, if you are downloading through iTunes, give us a little rating on iTunes. We'd love to hear what you think of
Armando,
the
the final words will be yours, my friend. Sign us off, please.
All right, everybody. Chat room, you have been great. Everybody stay safe during these quirky times. We're looking forward to seeing you next week. See you guys.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.